Noah Ellis pressed his palms against the stainless steel counter, watching the morning rush blur past in a familiar symphony of grinding beans and hissing steam. At 28, he'd mastered the art of the perfect espresso shot, could foam milk into delicate hearts and leaves, and had memorized the orders of every regular customer who frequented the Daily Bean. Yet despite his technical prowess, something hollow gnawed at him with each mechanical pull of the espresso machine. "Double shot, oat milk, extra hot," he called out, sliding the cup across the counter to a businessman who barely glanced up from his phone. The man grabbed his drink and vanished into the crowd, just another face in the endless stream of caffeine-dependent souls who treated Noah's carefully crafted beverages like mere fuel. The Daily Bean was successful, predictable, and utterly soul-crushing. The menu hadn't changed in 3 years, the decor remained aggressively beige, and the owner, Mr. Peterson, seemed allergic to any suggestion that deviated from their proven formula. "If it ain't broke, don't fix it," Peterson would say whenever Noah pitched ideas for seasonal specials or unique flavor combinations. But Noah felt broken, trapped in a routine that suffocated his creativity like a lid screwed too tight on a jar of possibilities. During his lunch break, Noah often found himself staring at the faded photograph tucked behind the register, a picture of his Aunt Clara, flour dusting her wild gray hair, grinning as she held up a tray of impossibly purple cupcakes. Clara had been the family's beautiful disaster, an artist who'd spent her life chasing whimsical projects that never quite stuck. Her experimental dessert pop-up had lasted exactly 3 months before shuttering, leaving behind nothing but fond memories and a cottage full of strange baking equipment. "Unlocking flavors," she used to say, her eyes twinkling with mischief. "That's the real magic, Noah. Not following recipes, but listening to what wants to be created." He'd been 16 then, rolling his eyes at her eccentric philosophies while secretly fascinated by the way she could transform ordinary ingredients into extraordinary experiences. Now, 12 years later, he wondered if she'd been the only one who truly understood the artistry that all food could embody. The upcoming Customer Appreciation Week loomed like a storm cloud on Noah's horizon. It was Peterson's annual attempt to boost loyalty card signups, involving free samples of their most basic blends and forced enthusiasm from the staff. Noah had survived 4 of these promotional nightmares, each one chipping away at his spirit like water eroding stone. The thought of another week of fake smiles and rehearsed small talk made his stomach clench. As he prepared for the afternoon shift, Noah ducked into the storage room to restock their selection of exotic teas, the one concession Peterson had made to variety, though they sold maybe 3 cups per month. While wrestling with boxes of Earl Grey and chamomile, his elbow knocked against a back shelf, which gave way with a surprising creak. Behind it, wedged in the narrow gap between shelf and wall, sat a small wooden box. The box was intricately carved, about the size of a jewelry case, and strangely warm to the touch. Noah lifted it carefully, noting its unusual weight and the faint, almost musical pattern etched into its surface. Tiny symbols that looked like musical notes spiraled across the lid, so small they were nearly invisible unless caught in the right light. He assumed it was some forgotten tea caddy from the shop's earlier incarnation, though he'd never seen craftsmanship quite like this. The next morning brought Mrs. Gable, punctual as always at 9:47 a.m. She was a slight woman in her 70s with silver hair perpetually escaping from a loose bun and eyes that seemed to hold secrets. For 6 months, she'd ordered the same peculiar combination, a medium dark roast with exactly half a pump of vanilla syrup, 2 splashes of whole milk, and no sugar from their dispensers. Instead, she carried her own sugar cubes in a small tin, irregular, crystalline things that caught the light like tiny prisms. "The usual, Mrs. Gable?" Noah asked, already reaching for the dark roast. She nodded, settling onto her preferred stool at the counter. As he prepared her coffee, Noah noticed she was studying him with unusual intensity. When he set the cup before her, she carefully selected one of her unique sugar cubes and dropped it in, watching it dissolve with the concentration of a scientist observing a crucial experiment. "You know," she said quietly, stirring her coffee with delicate precision, "your aunt had quite the gift for understanding flavors." Noah's hand froze on the espresso machine. You knew Aunt Clara? Mrs. Gable's eyes crinkled with something that might have been amusement. Oh yes, dear. We were collaborators, you might say. She took a sip of her coffee, left $1 tip, and departed without another word, leaving one of her strange sugar cubes on the counter. That afternoon, alone in the shop during the midday lull, Noah couldn't resist examining the abandoned sugar cube. It was unlike anything he'd seen, not quite white, not quite clear, with an almost iridescent quality that seemed to shift in the light. He touched it with his fingertip, then impulsively placed it on his tongue. The flavor explosion was immediate and bewildering. It wasn't sweetness so much as a symphony of tastes he couldn't quite identify. Vanilla, yes, but also something floral, something that reminded him of summer rain, and underneath it all, a complexity that made his trained palate struggle to keep up. The sensation lasted only seconds, but it left him with a peculiar longing, as if he'd glimpsed something extraordinary that had vanished too quickly to fully appreciate. The wooden box seemed to appear everywhere now. He'd set it on the storage room shelf, but the next morning found it beside the register. When he moved it to the back office, it somehow migrated to the counter near the espresso machine. Each time he handled it, the carved musical notes seemed to pulse with warmth, and he found himself tracing their patterns with his finger during quiet moments. Customer Appreciation Week arrived with Peterson's usual fanfare. Colorful banners, sample trays, and a script Noah was expected to recite to every customer. Welcome to the Daily Beans Customer Appreciation Week. Try our featured blend and sign up for a loyalty program to earn points toward free drinks. The words tasted like cardboard in his mouth. By Wednesday, Noah's patience had worn thin. The promotional coffee was uninspiring, the customers were indifferent, and Peterson kept hovering, counting sample cups and muttering about overhead costs. During a particularly busy morning rush, the main coffee grinder chose that moment to emit a grinding shriek and die completely. Perfect, Noah muttered, staring at the lifeless machine. The backup grinder was in the shop for repairs, leaving him with only the ancient hand-cranked contraption he discovered in the back room, a brass and wood relic that looked like it belonged in a museum rather than a working café. Hauling the antique grinder to the counter, Noah began the laborious process of grinding beans by hand. The first thing he noticed was the sound, not the harsh mechanical whir of electric grinders, but a series of distinct clicks that seemed to follow a rhythm. With each turn of the handle, the grinder produced a sequence of metallic notes that varied depending on the type of bean being processed. The dark roast made deep, resonant clicks. The medium roast produced a lighter, more staccato rhythm. And when he experimented with their premium Colombian blend, the clicks formed what sounded almost like a melody, a simple, repetitive tune that lodged itself in his mind like a half-remembered song. The coffee shortage that struck Thursday morning felt like the universe's idea of a cruel joke. Their supplier's delivery truck had broken down, leaving them with barely enough beans to last until noon. But worse than the bean shortage was the sugar crisis. Their usual supplier had delivered the wrong order, leaving them with industrial-grade sweetener packets instead of their normal sugar dispensers. Desperate to keep the cafe running, Noah remembered the bag of unmarked sugar he'd found while cleaning out Aunt Clara's cottage the previous month. He'd brought it to the shop intending to throw it away, but it had ended up forgotten in the back room. The sugar was an odd, slightly golden color, and each grain seemed to catch the light in an unusual way, but it was better than nothing. As he filled the sugar dispensers with Clara's mysterious sweetener, Noah couldn't shake the feeling that he was crossing some invisible threshold. The sugar felt different in his hands, warmer, somehow more alive than regular sugar should be. When he tasted a small amount, it carried the same complex flavor notes he'd experienced with Mrs. Gable's sugar cubes, though gentler, more subtle. Thursday evening brought an unexpected discovery. While cleaning the hand-cranked grinder, Noah impulsively decided to grind one of Mrs. Gable's leftover sugar cubes. The results were extraordinary. The grinder produced a series of clear, bell-like chimes that seemed to harmonize with each other, creating a brief but complete musical phrase. As the last note faded, something impossible happened. A tiny symbol appeared on the wall beside the grinder, projected as if by some hidden mechanism, glowing faintly for just a moment before vanishing. Noah blinked hard, convinced he was seeing things. Exhaustion and stress were making him imagine projections and musical sugar cubes. But the memory of that fleeting symbol, something that looked like a stylized coffee cup surrounded by musical notes, haunted him through the night. Friday arrived with leaden skies and Noah's deepest reluctance to face the final day of Customer Appreciation Week. His enthusiasm for the promotional event had long since died, replaced by a mechanical going through the motions that felt like acting in a play he'd never auditioned for. The sample coffee sat in thermal carafes, lukewarm and uninspiring, while loyalty card applications gathered dust beside the register. But as the morning progressed, Noah found himself drawn repeatedly to the wooden box, now permanently stationed beside the espresso machine. The musical notes carved into its surface seemed more defined today, more purposeful. When he traced them with his finger, they felt warm, not just from ambient heat, but with an energy that pulsed in rhythm with something he couldn't quite identify. Mrs. Gable appeared at precisely 9:47 a.m., as she had every day for 6 months. But today, something was different. Her usual quiet demeanor carried an undercurrent of anticipation, and her eyes held a brightness that made Noah suddenly alert. "The usual?" he asked, reaching for the dark roast. "Please," she said, settling onto her stool. But instead of her typical patient waiting, she watched every movement Noah made with intense focus. As he prepared her coffee, Noah felt an inexplicable urge to use the hand-cranked grinder instead of the newly repaired electric one. The dark roast beans fell into the grinder's chamber with a satisfying rattle, and as he began to turn the handle, the familiar clicking rhythm emerged. But today, the rhythm seemed to align with something else, the pattern of musical notes on the wooden box, which seemed to pulse in time with the grinder's clicks. Without conscious thought, Noah found himself adding a scoop of Aunt Clara's golden sugar to the coffee. The moment the unusual sweetener hit the hot liquid, the grinder's clicks seemed to intensify, forming a complete melodic phrase that lasted exactly as long as it took the sugar to dissolve. He set the cup before Mrs. Gable, his hands trembling slightly from an adrenaline rush he couldn't explain. She lifted the cup to her lips, took a careful sip, and her eyes widened with an expression of pure delight. "Young man," she said, her voice carrying a warmth that seemed to fill the entire café, "you've done it. You've found the melody blend." The words hit Noah like a physical force. "The what?" Mrs. Gable set down her cup and smiled, not the polite smile she'd worn for 6 months, but something radiant and knowing. "I was your Aunt Clara's dearest friend and her partner in culinary adventures. She spoke of you constantly, worried that you'd lost your way in the world of predictable flavors." Noah's mind reeled. "But how did you know I worked here? How did you know about the coffee?" "Oh, my dear boy," Mrs. Gable laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Clara didn't just know you worked here. She arranged for you to work here. She bought this building, hired Peterson as a front manager, and designed the entire cafe as an elaborate puzzle, a gift for you to discover when you were ready." The wooden box, the strange sugar cubes, the hand-cranked grinder. Suddenly, every odd detail of the past weeks clicked into place like tumblers in a lock. Noah sank onto the stool beside Mrs. Gable, his legs suddenly unsteady. "The box," he whispered. "A flavor-locking music box," Mrs. Gable confirmed. "Clara's masterpiece. She believed that flavors had musical signatures, that the right combination of ingredients could create harmony just like notes in a song. The grinder was specially modified to play specific melodies based on the beans being ground, and the sugar she left you was the final key, a sweetener infused with concentrated flavor essences that only activate when they encounter the right musical frequency." Noah's hands shook as he reached for the wooden box. "But why all the secrecy? Why not just give me the café directly?" Mrs. Gable's expression grew tender. "Because Clara knew you needed to discover your own passion, not have it handed to you. She wanted you to remember the joy of creation, the thrill of experimentation. She said you'd forgotten how to play with flavors, how to trust your instincts. The puzzle was meant to reawaken that part of you. And the sugar cubes you brought every day? Different flavor essences, each one designed to help you recognize the complexity that was possible. I've been waiting 6 months for you to find the right combination, to create the melody blend that would unlock everything Clara left for you. Noah stared at the coffee cup in Mrs. Gable's hands. What happens now? Now, she said, standing and pulling a set of keys from her purse, you inherit what was always meant to be yours. The café, the equipment, the recipes Clara spent years developing. And most importantly, the freedom to create without limits. The keys felt impossibly heavy in Noah's palm. But Peterson will be very well compensated for his excellent caretaking services and help to find a new position. Clara was nothing if not thorough in her planning. As if summoned by their conversation, Peterson appeared from the back office, carrying a manila envelope. His usual stern expression had been replaced by something that looked almost like relief. Noah, he said, handing over the envelope, I've been waiting 1.5 years to give you this. Your aunt made me promise to wait until you discovered the melody blend on your own. He paused, then smiled. The first genuine smile Noah had ever seen from him. I've got to say, watching you figure it out has been better than any TV show. Inside the envelope was a deed to the building, a bank account number, and a letter in Clara's familiar handwriting. My dearest Noah, if you're reading this, you've found your way back to the magic of creation. I've watched you grow into a skilled craftsman, but I worried you'd forgotten how to be an artist. The Daily Bean was never about coffee. It was about helping you remember that the most extraordinary experiences come from the courage to experiment, to play, to trust that your instincts will guide you to something wonderful. The recipes I've left you are just the beginning. Each one is a puzzle, a musical phrase waiting to be discovered. Some will come easily, others will challenge you for months. All of them will help you understand that cooking, whether it's coffee, pastries, or anything else, is a conversation between you and the ingredients, a dance between intention and intuition. The café is yours now, to shape as you see fit. I hope you'll make it a place where people come not just for sustenance, but for surprise, for delight, for the joy of experiencing something they've never tasted before. Remember, flavors want to be unlocked. Your job is simply to listen. All my love and faith in your extraordinary future, Aunt Clara. P.S. The music box contains 47 different melody combinations. You've found one. I can't wait to see what you discover with the other 46. Noah looked up to find Mrs. Gable and Peterson watching him with expectant faces. Through the café's front window, he could see customers gathering, drawn by word of mouth about the mysterious drink that had caused such a stir. What do I do now? He asked. Now, Mrs. Gable said, her eyes twinkling with the same mischief Noah remembered from his aunt. You brew a new future. The next hours passed in a blur of revelation and excitement. As word spread about the melody blend, customers began arriving in unprecedented numbers. Each cup Noah prepared using the hand-cranked grinder and Clara's special sugar produced subtle variations in flavor, as if the musical frequencies were creating an infinite spectrum of taste experiences. A food blogger arrived by noon, then a journalist from the local paper, then a photographer who'd heard rumors about a musical coffee that was supposedly creating a sensation across social media. Noah found himself explaining the concept of flavor melodies to increasingly fascinated audiences, his initial nervousness giving way to genuine excitement as he watched people's faces light up with their first taste of something truly extraordinary. Mrs. Gable appointed herself as unofficial historian, regaling customers with stories of Clara's experimental approach to flavor and the months of preparation that had gone into creating the café's hidden surprises. She revealed that Clara had left detailed notes about dozens of other potential discoveries, teas that changed color based on the drinker's mood, pastries that released different aromas as they cooled, even a hot chocolate that supposedly tasted like childhood memories. By evening, Noah had made a decision that would have terrified him that morning. He called Peterson aside and, with hands that shook only slightly, announced that the Daily Bean was permanently closing. In its place would rise something new, a café dedicated to Clara's philosophy of culinary adventure and musical flavors. What will you call it?
Peterson asked.
Noah looked at the wooden box, At Mrs. Gable chatting animatedly with a customer about the science of taste and sound, at the hand-cranked grinder that had become the centerpiece of his new life. Melody and Bean, he said. A place where every cup tells a story and every story has its own song. The transformation began immediately. Within days, Noah had stripped away the aggressively beige decor, replacing it with warm woods and copper accents that complemented the musical theme. The walls filled with photographs of Clara's experiments, sheets of her handwritten recipes, and small instruments that customers could play while waiting for their orders. The menu evolved daily as Noah discovered new combinations. The Harmony blend used 3 different bean varieties ground in sequence to create a layered flavor experience. The Crescendo was a progressive drink that started mild and built to an intense finish. The Lullaby combined lavender-infused sugar with a gentle roast that customers claimed helped them sleep better. Mrs. Gable became Noah's mentor and unofficial co-conspirator, helping him decode Clara's more cryptic recipe notes and sharing stories about the months of experimentation that had led to each discovery. She revealed that Clara had been working on a seasonal symphony, drinks that would change throughout the year based on available ingredients and the musical frequencies that supposedly matched different weather patterns. The café's reputation grew beyond anything Noah had imagined possible. Food critics made pilgrimages to experience the melody blend. Musicians came to explore the relationship between sound and taste, and coffee enthusiasts traveled from other cities to sample flavors they couldn't find anywhere else. But more than the external success, Noah felt a profound internal transformation. The hollow feeling that had plagued him for years was gone, replaced by a sense of purpose and excitement that made him leap out of bed each morning. He was no longer just a barista following recipes. He was a culinary explorer, pushing boundaries and creating experiences that brought joy to everyone who walked through his door. 3 months after discovering the Melody blend, Noah stood in his transformed café, watching the evening crowd enjoy their experimental beverages. A couple shared a duet, 2 complementary flavors that tasted different when drunk individually but created something entirely new when combined. A group of students huddled over their symphony samplers, comparing notes about the different movements of flavor they experienced. The wooden box sat in a place of honor on the counter, its musical notes now clearly visible thanks to special lighting Noah had installed. Customers often asked about it, and Noah would explain how it had started everything, how his aunt's belief in the connection between music and flavor had transformed not just his career, but his entire understanding of what food could be. As he watched Mrs. Gable demonstrate the hand-cranked grinder to a fascinated tourist, Noah felt a presence beside him that was both memory and gratitude. Clara had given him more than a café. She'd given him back his capacity for wonder, his courage to experiment, and his faith that the most extraordinary experiences often came from the simplest acts of creation. The last customer of the evening was a young woman who ordered the Melody blend and sat quietly in the corner, her eyes wide with amazement as she experienced the layers of flavor that had started Noah's journey. When she finished, she approached the counter with the same expression Noah remembered from his own first taste of Mrs. Gable's sugar cube. "That was incredible," she said. "I'm a chef at a restaurant downtown, and I've never experienced anything like this. How did you learn to do this?" Noah smiled, reaching for the wooden box and tracing the musical notes with his finger. "My aunt taught me that flavors want to be unlocked. You just have to learn how to listen." Outside, the city hummed with its evening rhythms, but inside Melody and Bean, the real music was just beginning. 46 melodies waited to be discovered, 46 new adventures in flavor and sound. And Noah Ellis, no longer just a barista but a composer of taste, couldn't wait to find them all.